This debate is now in session. Resolved, Puerto Rico ought to be a state in U.S. Start when you're ready.
Affirmation. There was a family of 5 children, mom and dad. It was a hard-working family with a great reputation and love in its neighborhood. One day, a child knocks at the door, telling him that he is his father. This child lost his mother recently and found a letter about his father and decided to contact him. The father was in shock, and after a while decided to let him in his house, but in a room he had outside the main house. They get together in a few occasions after that with the whole family, but one day he noticed the different treatment from the rest of the family, and that the father gave more attention, support, and considerations to the other 5 children, and treat him with some reservation and limitation. Puerto Rico is that child looking to have a better treatment as the other children. I affirm the resolution to let Puerto Rico become the next state of the United States. Being under the U.S. territory since 1898, Puerto Rico is fully protected and supported by the U.S. government. But this does not mean that the Puerto Ricans have all the same rights as stateside residents of the U.S. Things such as the right to vote and other benefits are not given to Puerto Ricans, but we are forced to fight in the U.S. military, and we have allowed to own lands in the U.S. So why not to just make Puerto Rico a U.S. state? Let us take a look at why we should. Contention 1. It allows for an improvement in quality of life. Nearly half of the people in Puerto Rico are living under the poverty line, and in its integration as a full state will bring jobs, opportunities, and a wealth of benefits to a country that desperately needs it. Contention 2. It helps the U.S. greatly in terms of economics. According to records, Puerto Rico is costing the U.S. over $22 billion a year, but as a state, it can contribute nearly $2 billion for the U.S. Treasury every year. Contention 3. It offers more opportunities for Puerto Ricans. As previously mentioned, a high percentage of Puerto Ricans are living below poverty level, but this would not be the case if our country statehood goes into effect. This means that all residents would get access to job and income creation benefits that could make a difference. Moreover, we can integrate into the U.S. national economy, allowing to pull ourselves of our hardship we are experiencing. Contention 4. It engages a political sway. With over 3.4 million people, Puerto Rico can have an impressive 9 electoral votes in elections and would have 7 House representatives and 2 senators representing them on current issues causing a large chief political control. Contention 5. It can improve Puerto Rico government system. Currently, Puerto Ricans do not exercise sovereignty over our own affairs, which we have a state government and allowed to elect a governor like all other states. The U.S. Congress would be the one controlling Puerto Rico's destiny. We even vote for candidates for U.S. president in primaries, but we are not allowed to vote for the president itself. Contention 6. It allows Puerto Ricans to have a say in the government and laws that affect them. We have a resident commissioner in the Congress with no right to vote, though the U.S. Congress has the final say of everything that would go on in Puerto Rico. It is not possible for our citizens to vote in U.S. election, which means that statutes and laws that apply to us are not things we can vote on. If the statehood where it happens, then Puerto Rico can finally vote on laws that would apply to them. Contention 7. It's allowed for open trade. We have to remember that right now, the Jones Act expressed that no merchant marine that doesn't have a U.S. flag can export any product to Puerto Rico. For that reason, any non-American ship has to go first to U.S. piers, transfer the shipment to an American ship, and then send the shipment to Puerto Rico, elevating the shipment cost to those products in the island commerce. With the statehood, Puerto Rico would lower the shipment costs dramatically and would enter into an open trade market with all the alliance of the U.S., which can greatly stimulate its economy and in turn the U.S. As a matter of fact, the economy of Alaska and Hawaii was as bad as Puerto Rico prior to its admission as a state. Then the economy improved considerably after being a state of the U.S. Value, dignity. We want to be treated as other U.S. citizens as equals. Dignity is one of the values protected by the U.S. Constitution, and we want the dignity to be protected. Finally, the status quo of Puerto Rico is a colonial one. We have been a colony for the U.S. for the past 122 years, and we need to resolve this issue as soon as possible. In the 2012 plebiscite, 54% of voters expressed to be against the status quo, 61 expressed in favor of the statehood. Well, that wasn't the case for the other last two states, Alaska and Hawaii. In fact, there is no document or law amendment that establishes the English as the official language. We are citizens of the nation where we don't have the same rights and privileges as the American citizens. We want to have the same responsibility as the U.S. citizens, but we want the same benefits and treatment. Thank you.
6 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock.
Thank you.
Any per time?
No, ma'am.
Start whenever you're ready.
Judge ready? Opponent ready?
Yes.
Okay. At the beginning, you started with what I call a five-child analogy. Now, you said that the new child, right, would not get any support from the dad and would not get any attention from the dad. But in fact, that's not the case with Puerto Rico, right? Because Puerto Rico is literally has been giving donations and different parts from our economy to the island itself. So can you please answer my question of why did you intend to actually put that question there when it does not core apply?
Well, mine is could apply because, as the child I mentioned on my story, we haven't been U.S. citizens, but not with the same right and the same respect and dignity as the other U.S. citizens inside the nation. So I think that if we got that respect and dignity as the other U.S. citizen, when we become statehood, things will be improved in our family.
Thank you. You also mentioned that when Alaska and Hawaii were introduced into the U.S., right, their economies got better as they became the 49th and 50th state. But did they have such a bad crime rate as the U.S.?
Well, 2 months after Hawaii became a state, Pan American became the first airlines to travel to Hawaii. So before that,
but that doesn't answer my question. Were their crime rates as big as those of Puerto Rico?
Yeah, but you state that Hawaii economy was different as before the state, and I'm telling you, it proved after being state.
I understand that part, but was there crime as much as there is in Puerto Rico right now?
Not right now, but the thing is that.
No, but before it became a state, was there crime as much as in Puerto Rico?
No, certainly it was high. It is high now, but I think that is because of the treatment, unfair treatment from the U.S. to the Puerto Ricans.
Okay, thank you. Also, you mentioned that Puerto Rico was a colony. Can you emphasize on that?
Yes, a colony is a country that doesn't have the right to decide for himself. So, therefore, since the Congress have the last word on everything that affects Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico not having the right to vote for things against the Puerto Ricans, That's more or less the same definition as a
But
colony.
even in the 1950s, when Puerto Rico was allowed a governor, thank you.
Start when you're ready.
Judge ready? Opponent ready?
Yes.
$74 billion in debt, an unemployment rate of 8.8%, and a government that has been known for corruption and misuse of money. Would you really want a place like this to be a part of this country, of our union? The debate of whether or not Puerto Rico should be a state has gone on since the days of Manifest Destiny. But we all know that those days are long gone and long behind us. The statehood of Puerto Rico would bring consequences, major consequences, to not just our nation, but the island itself, too. So yes, I negate the resolve Puerto Rico ought to be a state in the US because it won't bring anything good, as my opponent has stated to you today. Everything that came out of his mouth can just be discarded because it has no logic to it. But I'll come back to that later on in this debate. In this debate, I'll be using my values of autonomy and independence and a criterion built on game theory. Since they prove my point, they prove my following first contention, that not everybody likes the idea that Puerto Rico should be a state. It not only is unpopular in the US, but in the Caribbean territory as well. Subpoint A, the referendum in 2017 was a political disaster. According to USA Today, on a 2017 non-binding referendum involving statehood, 97% of the votes were given to statehood. That's great, you know? That's very great. So I guess this debate is over. Thank you very much. But no, you know, I would have stopped there, but nope. So apparently, but wait. Although 97% of the votes were for statehood, only 23% of the population voted. 23%! Which indicates that not everybody participated in the island's future. That's literally what is letting you know that not everybody cares about statehood. Subpoint B. If Puerto Rico were to join the Union, that means that states like, quote, Washington State, Minnesota, California, Texas, and Florida would each lose one of their seats, since the maximum of seats is 435, which is the permitted amount, said Natalie Rigoli, who has a master's degree in law from the University of Texas. This states, due to not want to see another territory being these states do not want to see another territory to be added into the Union, because it would mean that it diminishes their power to say in these states which have a larger population. So basically, these states that have a larger population, they're gonna be losing their say. They're gonna be losing their votes in Congress. Not to say the shitstorm that will be the electoral college in this new state and because of this new state in the Union. If it comes to it, we may even have to question the electoral college, which sparks a whole new different debate. Which leads me to my next contention. Contention 2. PRs, as I'm gonna call it also, PR statehood will bring major political and economic problems to both parties. Subpoint A. Puerto Rico's economic problems will be inherited by the US if we go back to the article 18 Puerto Rico Statehood Pros and Cons by Natalie Rigoli. She states, critics agree that one of the primary reasons why statehood might be opposed by the United States is that Puerto Rico would immediately have the highest and poverty and crime in the country if it became the 51st state. She also adds, states have powers and responsibilities of their own. But with $74 billion in default debt and $49 billion in unfunded pension liabilities, the credit status is questionable. She is completely right in that part. And that's literally my statement right there. Now, I want to go back to some of my opponent's allegations. He stated that Puerto Rico is a colony. But as I stated earlier, in the 1950s, when Puerto Rico got their own governor, and even when Puerto Rico was annexed, not completely annexed as we know, into the US, it was stated as a territory. And even the people in Puerto Rico admit that it's a commonwealth. So therefore, it's not a colony. If my opponent were to call it a colony, it's because of private enterprises, not because of the government. Also, my opponent stated the state rights, that Puerto Rico has no rights whatsoever. But let me tell you something, Puerto Ricans have citizenship to the United States. They can run for Congress. He even said it for the commission. They can run for Congress. They can become politicians. They can even run for president as we saw in the 2016 election. So that is completely bold. You can scrap that out. Another thing that he stated was electoral college, that it would add to Puerto Rico. But as I stated in my statement earlier, that also can be discarded because other states will be losing their seats, like California and Florida, which have a big majority in Congress because of their population. Thank you very much.
6:39 on the clock. Any part time?
Nope.
Start whenever you're ready.
Just ready?
Yep.
Put it ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you're stating that Puerto Rico is a lack for the United States because of the economy. What was the Hawaii situation before being stated?
I don't know, you tell me, you're the one who brought it up.
Yes, Hawaii was as bad economy as Puerto Rico before it became a state. Right after being state, it just improved considerably the economy of its state's economy. You said that Texas doesn't want Puerto Rico to be a state because they lose some position in the Congress. Is that right?
Correction, they would be upset if Puerto Rico would to become a state because they would lose their power in, say, in Congress. Yes.
So that means that you don't want us to be a state because others lose their power?
No, I'm saying that these states would be upset if they were to lose their power, which means that people would be upset and there could be protests, riots, and that would just be horrifying to see.
Isn't that a form of racism?
It's not a form of racism and not a form of discrimination because it's just a fact, you know. People will get upset, you know. I'm not saying that I will get upset, that's not what this debate is about. It's that people who may be racist or that can discriminate will get upset. That's just, you know, that's just a fact. There's no side on that.
I don't know. For me, it's racism.
But yeah, like there could be racist, but that doesn't mean I'm racist. I'm just stating that there will be discrimination, and that we don't want to see another 1960s in our nation again. We don't want to see another counterculture. We don't want to see any of that back again.
Okay, but Puerto Rico wasn't the cause of that events in the past. Why should blame them for them now?
We're not blaming them. We're just blaming the statehood of it.
Well, the same fact that I stated. You admit that when Puerto Rico was next to the United States in 52, didn't do it completely. So you're giving me the reason.
Can you state that question again, or that statement again?
You state that in 1952, Puerto Rico annexed to U.S. but not completely.
Yes,
So
as a
you're-
territory, but not as a colony. A colony has a completely different meaning. Do you want me to tell you the meaning of a colony?
Well, the
If
same
that helps you?
The same as the status quo of Puerto Rico.
Well, that's just a territory. That doesn't mean it's a colony. You could ask me for the definition of a colony if you don't understand it. That's fine if you don't understand.
Okay.
3 minutes and 9 seconds on the clock.
Thank you.
Josh, ready? Opponent ready?
Yes.
Okay, there's some fallacies that my opponent established in his opponents. I just want to talk about some fallacies that have been raised against Puerto Rico as a state. Fallacy number 1, it leads to cultural loss. It may be a concern that the Puerto Rican's culture would eventually be lost when Puerto Rico is integrated to the U.S. The country's Spanish language, along with other cultural aspects, would likely be replaced by English. Also, that they would lose their heritage in their become a state and would not be recognized as individual nation in the Olympics or World Beauty Pageant contest, which they have won several times. But that wasn't the case with Hawaii. They haven't lost its rich culture, and even when they represent U.S. in the Olympics, its state is part of its recognition. Fallacy number 2, it can hurt other Puerto Ricans' feeling of remaining an independent country. Time and time again, people in Puerto Rico have continuously voted for remaining a separate territory from the U.S., but does not stop those people who are calling for statehood. Many questions involve issues on citizens' rights and independence. There is not a single way to look at this statehood, but it is possible to develop into the most relevant issue with regard to this topic. Fallacy number 3, it causes loss of tourism. Tourism is the biggest source of revenue of Puerto Rico, and it is were to become a state, then its novelty would wear off. The country would no longer be considered an exotic destination because it needs to lose huge amount of money. On the contrary, this would boost up the tourism in the island that is happening in Hawaii. It can bring about a language barrier. Though English is mandatory in public school in Puerto Rico, it is taught as a foreign language where students are rarely receiving more than the 50 minutes of English instruction each day. But as a statehood, the English can become an important asset to the Puerto Rican as it happens on Hawaii. Fallacy number 5 is rise poverty and crime rates to the U.S. The unemployment, poverty and crime rates are unbelievable high in Puerto Rico, and the country integration to this will cause this statistic to be part of the U.S. numbers as mentioned by my opponent. But at a statehood, this rate can be considerably low when job opportunities will rise. Policy number 6, it makes Puerto Rico obliged to pay federal income tax. If Puerto Rico were to become a state, its citizens would no longer be exempt from federal income tax, forcing more people into the public due to the effects of increased taxes on the struggling economy. Right now, we pay more taxes for Puerto Rico than the one that we have to pay for the U.S. if we were a state. Therefore, as a state, the taxes will be lower and we go directly to the U.S. Treasury. Policy number 7, it may cause some kind of resentment to the U.S., as mentioned by my opponent. For some reason, the statehood would have a negative impact on Puerto Rico's standard of living or economy. Then, resentment may be developed, which can be dangerous to Puerto Ricans. That wasn't the case of Alaska and Hawaii when they become states. Thank you.
Judge ready? Opponent ready?
Yep.
Before I start, I want to point out that I'm going to be referring to Puerto Rico as Puerto Rico, PR, island, and territory. So, my opponent, here we go. My opponent said that Hawaii had a cultural shift. I want to address this first, the culture part, because my opponent just stated that if Puerto Rico gets into a state, becomes a state, then it would lose their culture. And he's basically agreeing with me. So right now you can just go ahead with my side because he is agreeing with me. He's saying that if Puerto Rico gets into the US, it would lose their culture. And that is completely right. And as we know, we're not that melting pot anymore of cultures like we were in the early 1900s. You know, there are countries and islands like Puerto Rico, right, and territories like Puerto Rico should remain with their culture. We're not that radical anymore. So he's proving my point. Puerto Rico will lose their culture. And he also stated language. It would lose their language. And he said that that Hawaii got annexed and they speak Hawaiian. But let me tell you something. Right now in Hawaii, there are only 1,000 native Hawaiian speakers and 8,000 people who can speak and understand the language. But that's just 8,000 in general. What's Hawaii's population? 1.416 million. That's just a small fraction. So they are losing their culture. They are losing their language. They are basically losing everything they have right now. Is that quality of life? Is that the better quality of life that my opponent is trying to achieve? No, it is not. I'm gonna answer that question right now. Now, another thing that my opponent said was independence. And there we go, he's agreeing with me. There are strong independence movements in Puerto Rico, which means that if there are strong independence movements, then the nation could even be independent right after it becomes a state. There could be radical independence movements. And we don't know that right now, but sure, it could be a thing. He even stated it. And if Puerto Rico wants to become independent, then why become a state? Another thing that he said was taxes. Here we go with the question of taxes. He said that taxes will be lowered. But if Puerto Rico were to become a state, it would introduce federal taxes. And with the rising economic issues of Puerto Rico, if it were to be introduced to federal taxes, that would just halt up the whole process and the whole government. Because if people can't even afford to pay more the taxes that they are already imposed to, then imagine if they were to be introduced to federal taxes. It is the same situation when the United States, when America was a colony, the 13 colonies, when they were introduced to the new taxes, everything went down from there. Well, for the British, for us it went up. But as we know, taxes is the main nail in the coffin. So we can't really introduce to that. Also, my opponent stated that the state of Puerto Rico should become a state because of its culture, and it just went all downhill from there. He was basically talking for me. He was talking for my point of view. If he said that Puerto Rico was a state, then he doesn't even know that Puerto Rico is a territory. He even went as far to say that the culture of Puerto Rico would be gone, the language of Puerto Rico would be gone, the taxes would be imposed. He is agreeing with my point. He also stated crime rates. Here we go with the question of crime rates. Now, my opponent was talking about crime rates and the crimes of Puerto Rico. If it were to become a state, then those crime rates will go down because of more jobs. But put yourself in this situation. Judge, put yourself in this situation, right? If you were to become, if the area where you live were to become a state and there are more jobs offered, right? But you are a drug dealer, as an example, right? This isn't in general. And you make thousands of dollars. Would you really leave your job for a job that gives you less money? That is the drug cartel. That is the criminal life. Are you like, that's not gonna lower crime rates? And though I'm talking for the criminals, not the crimes itself. So that's just not how it works. Just because you introduce new jobs, that doesn't mean that people are actually gonna take those jobs. And then when you notice, those businesses that you open will just be shutting down because nobody wants to work for them. So my opponent is literally just agreeing with most of my points right now. Now, another thing that I wanted to add was Well, actually, I don't need to because my opponent added the cultural differences, the language differences, and the independence differences. So there, I don't have to add anything that I was about to talk right now. And that's just how it is. So today I urge the audience and I urge the judge to vote for my side. Why? Because today my opponent has just been agreeing with me all the time. He has been agreeing with all my points. So that's just, he's even on my side. He may not show it. He may be on the side of Puerto Rico should be a state, but everything that he just stated before I went on in this stage, he has said all of them, so I don't even have to introduce them. So please vote for my side. Thank you very much.
Well, if you see, my opponent just proved my point. What I said about the fallacies, he didn't hear the word fallacies. So what I was saying is some misconception people have about losing culture, losing the language, and losing other things. He didn't hear my word about fallacies or misconception, and that's exactly my point. When U.S. Take in consideration to have Puerto Rico as a state, it's just like that. They don't hear, they don't listen, they don't take in consideration our dignity, our respects, and the right that we should have as U.S. citizens, as the main island does. So that's sadly my point. All the Congress and the United States is in the same situation. They keep hearing us, but they're not listening to what we are saying. He stated that I said that the majority of Puerto Rican want to be independent. That's not what I said. What I said is a misconception that Puerto Ricans should be independent instead of having to be statehood. Well, that's the case when we have United States have the civil rights. They have different opinions about the rights of the South versus the North, and that made to the worst wars in the U.S. history, when millions of lives were lost in that war on the civil rights. We are just 3.4 millions asking for have the same rights as the billions of persons living in the U.S. territory. We may be small, but we have a lot to apport to the culture of the United States, to the economy of the United States, and we have a lot of dignity that we want to express inside the multicultural and multi-face of the United States. As a matter of fact, that's the meaning of the United States. It's a union of different states, different cultures, different languages that became a part of the nation. As a matter of fact, there's no document written in the U.S. Constitution that established the English as the only allowed language in the U.S. It's just for costume that everything is done in English, but right now there's no written document, no constitution or no amendment that establish English as a sole language to be spoken in the U.S. States like Florida, California, Texas, all these states are part of the United States, but the major spoken language on those states are not English, are Spanish. So should we take it off Texas and Florida and California from the nation because they don't speak English? No, that's absurd. The United States is to have the different language and culture. So that's not the case with Puerto Rico. Thank you.